Welcome back, everybody. I'm J.R. Flatter, and this is the Two Roads Leadership Podcast, The Secrets of Leading in Government Contracting. My special guest this week, my distinguished guest this week is Mr. Oliver Chang. And Oliver, I'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to our audience. So if you want to take a couple minutes to do that.
Yeah, great. Thanks, JR. So I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Flatter. Actually started out here doing IT systems, so SharePoint servers and things like that. And like any good federal contracting company, they got me into proposals. So I dipped my toe in there. Was the proposal manager here for a time, and then kind of moved from there into a BD proposal capture role, and then finally in operations where I'm settled today.
Okay.
And so where I'm in right now, lead about 21 programs, depending on which ones you count. A couple of those are, task order based, and they're not constant revenue all day, every year. And those vary across a number of different departments and agencies, primarily Homeland Security, Department of Defense, Department of State. And then within those, we support the National Defense University, Defense Logistics Agency, U.S. Coast Guard, DHS Headquarters, Office of Intelligence Analysis, FPS, CBP, ICE. And then outside of some of those, the kind of big defending the homeland type components and departments, we also support FAA and USDA, some of the kind of civilian customers that we picked up over last year.
Wow. Sounds like a lot of complexity. How do you keep your head around all that?
I have a lot of good help, great team. And so, a lot of what I do is, some of it is kind of the kissing babies type stuff that you would imagine from an executive type role, but it's also very down in the weeds. So I try to touch base with each program at least every week or every other week. We talk about everything going on in the program, problems that they're having, how we can help support and fix that. And then, my support across the programs varies from client interaction and making sure that we're giving them what they need, but it also goes into hiring, retention, contract transition and ramp up, everything along those in that full scope of kind of contract execution from start to end. I play some kind of role in that.
Wow. So given that huge area of responsibility, how do you balance what you're doing on any given day?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. That's actually what I'm talking to my coach about is carving time out for myself to focus on some of the longer term things and not just what's going on that day. Because when you help oversee 21 different programs, there's always pop-up activities that come up every day. There's personnel issues, new requirements that are coming up. Customer has a new requirement that they want to add to a contract, which is always a good thing, but it takes up time out of your day that you weren't expecting or planning for. So, I've tried to do the carving out time in my calendar or block it off, and sometimes I'm successful with that. One of the things that we're in the process of doing right now is actually kind of restructuring the organization, the way we manage all the programs. So we actually fleeted up one of our senior program managers. His name is Rod, and he's going to be taking over a lot of my responsibilities so I can focus on some of the more company-oriented, growth-oriented and long-term strategic type things for the company. And so when you supervise 17 or 18 people across 20 programs who have subordinates under them, there's certain things that you just can't get away from on a day-to-day basis.
So a couple of things you mentioned that I find intriguing. One is 17 direct reports. Did I hear you say that right?
Yeah. So that's something that we're working on right now, slimming that number down a little bit.
I don't remember what the literature says exactly, but it's a number smaller than 17 of what an effective span of control could be or should be. That's good to hear. And then you also mentioned that you have a coach. What's that all about?
Yeah. So coaching is relatively new to me. I think we just started this towards the beginning of this year. But basically I meet with him once a week for an hour. It's basically focused on me as the coachee, if you will. And so for that hour, I basically bring up the challenges I'm facing in work, the things that I'm trying to accomplish. And really, we just talk about ways that I can achieve those goals. And it's all, the whole structure of it is basically he is helping me come to conclusions or think of things that I may already be thinking, but he's asking the thought-provoking questions that I should be considering or thinking about as I'm making my decisions. And so a lot of that has been focused on how do I make time for myself? How do I plan for these things? How do I better structure or support to where I'm not focused on the day-to-day personnel issues all the time, and I can carve some time out as an executive to focus on some other things within the company.
So, someone as busy as yourself, that hour, you find it valuable to carve out that hour?
I do, yeah. And actually, I told him this is one of the few hours in the week where I sit and talk to someone without also checking email or listening to what's on my phone, because there is that sense of accountability when we're talking. It's hard when you're taking virtual meetings all the time. Sometimes you're on or off camera. It's very tempting to check your email or see what else is going on or respond to a chat message on Teams. And so that's one of my kind of an uninterrupted hour during my week,
Mm.
which I told them I need to figure out how to get more of that, and then not feel guilty at the end of the hour, that I've been off the net or unreachable during that time.
Sounds great. So, somebody's thinking about becoming a chief operating officer or getting into government contracting. What advice might you have for them?
Yeah, it probably sounds cliche or very obvious, but it really is about people and your team. And I'll look at it from a very kind of tactical level as far as managing programs. But one of the most obvious indicators of whether or not you're doing a good job on a program is how's your staffing level and what's your retention rate. And I'm not saying that we're always perfect on those things. We have programs that are very challenging as far as the pace and the work that's involved, and the complexity of the programs. And so sometimes that is a direct impact to retention and personnel that you can't really affect. But there are elements of that you can control, and there are parts of that you can improve. Um, and so we try very hard, and we go out of our way to hire good people, vet them appropriately, sometimes even with the client, because we want to make sure that we're bringing the right people to the team, and we understand that the real cost of hiring the wrong person and having to replace them again in a couple months is very costly, not just in real dollars for hiring a new person, recruiting, putting out the job post, but also the real cost to your relationship with the client and your performance on that program. So it's really about finding the right people, hiring them, taking care of them, and then finding ways to retain them long term, finding avenues for growth to keep them within the program or within the company.
So, as you're prioritizing building a relationship with a customer, building a relationship with a team member, a teaming partner, contracting officer, small business office, how do you prioritize between those five constituent groups?
I think on a when you have a stakeholder engagement matrix, it's always like who do you talk to daily, who do you talk to weekly, others maybe monthly or quarterly. First and foremost is the direct client. Sometimes that's the core, sometimes that's the government program manager, but those are the people that you want to talk to regularly on a very frequent basis. The contracting officer, I would say, is always a stakeholder, but the level of interaction varies from program to program. And I say that because you have some where the KO is very involved, and I've had KOs that say, "Hey, I'd like to have monthly meetings with the core, and we can talk about how the program's going." And then I'll have other KOs who are very hands off, and unless there's a modification or they need to move travel funds from a client to another, they're pretty quiet and they're relatively hands off because could be that it's a firm fixed price contract, and as long as the burn rate's going well and the customer's not complaining, then they're also happy. So
Mm-hmm.
it really just depends on each program and each person. I don't think there's kind of a one size fits all and say talk to these people this many times this frequently. Um, so it really depends on that relationship that you have with that person.
I know we do a lot of team building with teaming partners, not necessarily internal to our team. I know that takes a lot of your energy. How do you build a team, a successful team across different companies?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good question, and a lot of it is building the right team or finding a team that works and then sticking to that team, because you'll
Mm-hmm.
find that as you work with companies in a prime sub relationship, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And you can't always salvage that relationship, and you have to be willing to let those relationships go if they're not working, because there's nothing worse than winning a contract, which is kind of the high of as far as excitement. But then you get into execution with a teaming partner, and you just realize it doesn't work out, and you guys
Mm,
aren't a good match for each other. And that's one of those things that you really can't know until you work together. But at that point, you can always make that decision. Okay, is this a relationship I want to continue forward or not? And so for us, we do have a kind of a core group of teammates that we've worked with in the past that we know are good teammates. They contribute to proposal development. They're easy to work with on the execution side of things. And so when we find teammates like that or companies like that, we want to keep working with them and keep developing that
hmm
relationship.
Yeah, that's great insight. It's not lost on me that you didn't once mention how good are they at what they do.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I mean, it's important, but it's, I would say, less important than, what is the relationship you have with them? Can you work
Hmm
together successfully?
Yeah,
Because when it comes to talent and expertise, we can find that, we can bring that onto the team. There's certain things that, you can't do anything about.
right. That's great insight. Thanks. And also, at some point, it becomes an opportunity cost discussion, right? How many people do you have time to meet and build relationships with? And so, if
Right.
you've done that once, then that's behind you. You don't have to do it again. All right. Well, one of the requirements of our podcast is called The Secrets of Government Contracting. So, one of the requirements of being a guest is you have to tell our listeners one of your secrets to success. So, what is it that keeps you winning and keeps you happy?
Let's see. I guess if I had a secret to winning, or like a golden, a silver bullet for it, then we'd all be billionaires and running off into the sunset, and we wouldn't be sitting on this podcast. But I think one of the things that we do often as contractors on this side of the business is we assume and we get discouraged. So I think my advice would be, don't assume when you're interacting with the government, and don't get discouraged. And
Mm,
what I mean by that is, as contractors, we read into everything that the government does or doesn't do, or they everything they do or don't in the telegraph. And that
mhm,
could be in an RFP stage, how they answer questions, whether they require PPQs, whether it's a 10-page technical volume or a 30-page technical volume. We read between the lines on everything.
mhm,
And the government often doesn't think about the kind of second or third order effects of how we perceive that. And I know because I've talked to the government in some industry days or reverse industry days about these, and some of them are relatively private settings where you can be a little bit more candid. And when I tell them these things about, well, when you require PPQs and it's a 10-day turnaround, that's very discouraging, and that deters people from bidding. They think, well, we don't even think about that. We really just want PPQs, and we don't always trust that the CPAR's information is going to be up to date, because sometimes that could be from a year or 2 years ago.
mhm,
And if you look at it that way, that makes sense. But oftentimes, as contractors, we'll see something like that, and we'll get discouraged, and we'll say, "Yeah, that's wired, right? That's a term that we all use very frequently." Or, "We don't have a shot at this. They're telegraphing that they want the incumbent, or they want these other guys." And I say, don't assume. Um, the only way to bid is to win, or sorry, the only way to win is to bid. If you don't put in a proposal, your P win is 0% always. Um, so don't get discouraged in this business. Ask your questions, and you just never know what's going to happen. And
mhm.
yeah, I would say that's my one piece of advice, is not to assume that you know the intent of the government or what they're trying to do or planning to do, and then not to get discouraged by how you're reading it.
No, that's great. Thanks so much for that. And that secret's informed with a lot of scars on your back, right? And a lot
I think we all do. I think the key is to. I'm young enough, so I don't have the right yet to be very jaded by this. Maybe in another 20 or 30 years, but yeah, I don't think I'm quite there yet.
I don't think you'll get there. You get a pretty positive outlook on life.
Yeah.
So, last requirement is give us a couple names of people you think would be good guests for our audience to inform them on how this government contracting industry works.
Yeah, that'd be great. So I think two people who are kind of, I would say, very different as far as on the spectrum of as far as experience and what they do, and they're very different. So the first is retired Command Sergeant Major Patrick Alston from the U.S. Army, and I recommend him because although he's not a government contracting professional, he is a expert when it comes to networking and developing relationships,
Mm-hmm.
which is really key to our business. The first thing that we talk about when we try to capture a contract or a piece of work is, does anybody know somebody relating to this opportunity? Does anybody have a network where we can understand their pain points? And more often than not, if it's something in DoD, Patrick knows that person. And it's a real relationship. It's not that I've been in this industry for 30 years and I have a Rolodex of 10,000 names. He's helped these people out at some point in their career and not expected anything in return in most cases. And so what does that do across 40 years of doing that? What does your network look like at the end of that? And it's really impressive to see the kind of span that he has. Second person is somebody we've been working with for a number of years. His name's Aaron Umberger, and he's at Grant Thornton currently. And he's kind of on the other side of things because he's a younger guy, kind of like me. But he's also both operations focused and also bid and proposal capture focused. And just seeing the way that he operates, the kind of understanding that he has across the whole span of federal contracting. You know, he's not a one-trick pony, so to speak, who only does operations or only does technical writing. He understands pricing, strategy, staffing, and so I've been very impressed with his level of knowledge of the industry as well.
Wonderful. Well, our time is up, and we're going to get on with the rest of your day. Greatly appreciate you sharing some time and some of your insights and wisdoms, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gerald.
Thanks, Oliver.
Okay. Bye-bye.